The wind on the surface of the ice moon screamed like a dying god. But down here in the tunnels, the silence was worse. It was a heavy, suffocating quiet, broken only by the rhythmic crunch of Jace's magnetic boots clamping onto the sheer vertical drop of a frozen ventilation shaft. He paused, hanging one-handed from a corroded rung, and wiped a layer of frost from his faceplate. His breath hitched in his throat, a jagged cloud of white in the dark. Great work, Jace, he thought, the sarcasm echoing in the confines of his helmet. Take the job, they said. It is just a simple salvage run, they said. Quick in and out, no problem. He looked down, beneath his boots. The shaft dropped away into a swallowing abyss of blue-black darkness. He looked up, 1,000 feet of unstable ice and shifting tectonic plates. He was 28 years old, and he felt about 90. His scanner, strapped to his forearm, let out a pathetic warble. Jace tapped it hard with his knuckles. The screen flickered, displaying a map that looked less like a schematic and more like a child's drawing of a labyrinth. Level 7, Jace muttered to the empty air. We are supposed to be at level 7. This looks like the basement of hell. He hauled himself up another meter. His movement was stiff, hindered by the layers of thermal insulation and the heavy army surplus jacket he wore over his exosuit. The jacket was a relic, older than he was, bearing a faded patch on the shoulder, the insignia of the colonial vanguard. It did not belong to him. It had belonged to a man who died believing the Holy Council was actually protecting them. Jace wore it for warmth, not sentiment, though the weight of it always felt like a reminder of everything he was trying to outrun. Inside the breast pocket, tucked against his heart, was a cracked hollow frame. He did not need to look at it to see the image. A girl with bright eyes and a crooked smile standing in front of a recruitment banner. His sister, Ilara. She had vanished 3 years ago during a classified operation in the Outer Rim. The official report said missing in action. The unofficial word on the street, the one Jace had paid 3,000 credits to hear, was that there was no action. She had just disappeared. That information had cost him everything. It was why he was here, dangling like a spider in a freezer, hunting for scrap on a moon that did not appear on any official star chart. He owed the SynCorp Syndicate a sum of money that made his stomach turn just thinking about it. A rumble shook the shaft. Ice dust rained down on his helmet, pattering like hail. Easy, he whispered, gripping the rung until his knuckles turned white inside his gloves. Do not come down on me now. I have not even found the loot yet. He reached the top of the climb and scrambled over the lip of a jagged opening, rolling onto a flat surface. He lay there for a moment, letting his heart rate descend from the panic zone. The air in the suit tasted stale, recycled one too many times. When he finally pushed himself up, the sarcasm died in his throat. He was not in a mine. He was not in a bunker. Jace stood at the entrance of a colossal cavern, a hollowed-out geode inside the moon's crust. But it was not natural. The walls were lined with obsidian spires that stretched upward, piercing the blue glacial ice above like black needles. The architecture was seamless, organic yet metallic, as if the building had been grown rather than built. It was a cathedral, an ancient alien cathedral fused with machinery that hummed with a frequency he could feel in his teeth. Okay, Jace said, his voice sounding very small. That is new. He stepped forward, his mag boots deactivating as he hit smooth black stone. The walkway before him was flanked by tall, crystalline pillars. As he passed the first one, his helmet lights caught something inside the crystal. He stopped. He leaned in. Suspended in the amber-like transparency of the pillar was a figure. It was humanoid, desiccated, wrapped in ceremonial robes that had not decayed. But it was the face that made Jace recoil. The mouth was open in a silent scream, and wires, thin, silver filaments, were threaded through the jaw and into the eye sockets. It was not a tomb. It was a battery. Jace swallowed hard, fighting the urge to turn around and climb back down the death shaft. He checked his scanner again. The readings were going haywire. The radiation counter was flatlining, then spiking, then showing 0. The chronometer was spinning backward. Phantom life signs appeared on the periphery of his heads-up display. Red dots that flickered and vanished. "System," Jace said, trying to keep his voice steady. Filter signal noise. "Processing." The automated voice of his wristband replied. It sounded clipped, distorted. "Warning. Temporal anomaly detected." Jace walked faster. The walkway extended over a drop so deep he could not see the bottom, leading toward a massive circular gate at the far end of the chamber. As he walked, the air around him seemed to shimmer. For a split second, the silence was shattered by a roar, the sound of 10,000 voices screaming in unison. He flinched, spinning around, raising his multi-tool like a weapon. There was nothing there, just the silent, frozen dead in their crystal cages. Then, the image overlaid his vision. A time echo. He saw the walkway not as it was, but as it had been. Crowds of beings in flowing silver armor kneeling, their heads bowed, banners unfurled from the obsidian spires, red and black silk snapping in a phantom wind. And on every banner, the same symbol. A stylized, horned woman holding a bleeding star. The image vanished as quickly as it had come, leaving Jace blinking at the gloom. "Ghosts," he muttered, forcing a laugh that sounded more like a cough. "Great. I am robbing a cursed vampire church. If a skeleton pops out and asks me a riddle, I am quitting." He reached the great circular gate. It was sealed, marked with glyphs that pulsed with a faint, dying violet light. Jace held up his scanner. The translation software churned, cycling through millions of dialects before pinging. "Sanctum of the Ascendant." The AI read, "Warning, high energy signature detected within." "That is the paycheck," Jace said to himself. He pulled a decryption spike from his belt and jammed it into the interface slot on the door. The ancient mechanism groaned, a sound like grinding bones. Dust cascaded from the archway. Slowly, agonizingly, the heavy metal pedals of the door retracted. Jace stepped through, and then he stopped breathing. The chamber beyond was a void, a sphere of empty space carved out of the heart of the moon. There was no floor, only a narrow bridge of black metal stretching out over an abyss that went down to the core of the world. Hovering in the center of the void, suspended by cables thick as tree trunks that stretched into the darkness like black veins, was a machine. It was shaped like a cross, a massive, brutal cruciform engine humming with terrifying power, and nailed to it was a woman. Jace took a step forward, drawn by a horrified fascination he could not control. The sheer scale of it was impossible. The cross was 10 stories tall. The figure pinned to it was larger than a human, perhaps 8 feet tall if she were standing. But she looked small against the enormity of the machine. He raised his magnifiers. She was nailed through her palms. Spears of glowing white star metal pierced her hands, pinning them to the crossbeams. Another spear was driven through her feet. A fourth, the largest of them all, was thrust directly through the center of her chest, pinning her heart to the engine behind her. She was terrifying. She was beautiful. Her skin was the color of moonlight on snow, pale silver and flawless. Her hair floated around her face in a gravity-defying halo, dark as a nebula and dusted with starlight. She wore a dress that looked like it had been forged from armor and silk, now torn and fused with the cables of the machine. Even frozen in stasis, she radiated power. Her head was bowed slightly, her eyes closed. From her temples curled two elegant obsidian horns that swept back into her hair. Her lips were parted, revealing the tips of long, translucent fangs. She looked like a fallen angel caught in the teeth of a demon. Jace checked his wristband. The air composition here was different, colder, absolute zero. "Look at the glyphs," he whispered, panning his light across the wall nearest the bridge. The writing was carved deep into the metal. The translation scrolled across his visor. Prisoner, Lithria. Designation, Apex. Sentence, eternal. Date of incarceration, year 0 of the Holy Ascendancy. Jace froze. Year 0. That was 1,000 years ago. He looked back at the woman on the cross. She had been hanging there, speared and bleeding into this machine for a millennium. He walked closer, his boots silent on the bridge. He reached the platform at the base of the cross. Up close, the horror of it was visceral. The star metal spears were not just holding her, they were pulsing. He could see light traveling from her body, up the shafts of the spears, and into the engine. They are draining her, Jace realized, a sick feeling settling in his gut. She is not just a prisoner. She is a battery, a living battery. He looked at the base of the platform. There was a console there, covered in dust but still active. He wiped the screen. It displayed a symbol he knew, a golden circle with 3 radiating spikes, the Holy Council. Jace stared at it. The council taught that they had brought order to the galaxy 1,000 years ago, driving back the darkness of the chaotic era. They claimed they had defeated the monsters. But this facility, this technology, it predated them. The symbols were part of the original architecture. He tapped a file on the console. A holographic recording sprang to life, flickering and distorted. A figure appeared in the air, a human in the opulent robes of a high prelate. But the style was ancient. He stood on a podium, pointing an accusing finger. "Devourer of worlds." The voice hissed through the static. "Unnatural longevity. Must be bound. Her blood will fuel the engine of our peace." The image cut to the woman. Lithria. She was standing then, surrounded by guards. She was not screaming. She looked sad. She looked at the camera, and for a second, Jace felt like she was looking right at him. "I offer you a union of stars," she said, her voice clear and melodic, cutting through the static. "You offer me chains." The recording glitched. The high prelate's face blurred, his words skipping. "Monster, predator. A death. It has been edited," Jace whispered. He tapped the screen, trying to clear the image, but the file was corrupted. They rewrote the history. They locked her up, drained her dry, and used the power to build their empire. A chime in his helmet made him jump. It was a priority tight beam transmission. "Jace," the voice of his handler, "verify coordinates." "I am at the coordinates," Jace said, his voice tight. "You did not tell me what I would find here." "We paid you for a retrieval, not a critique," the handler said. The tone was cold, metallic. "Retrieve the cruciform core. Do not touch the body. It is a holy artifact." Jace looked up at the spear in Lithria's chest. The glowing white shaft was pulsing with energy. It was the linchpin. It was the only thing keeping the engine running. "The core is the spear," Jace said. "It is pinning her heart." "Correct," the handler replied. "Remove it. The body will be disposed of later." Jace looked at the woman's face. She looked peaceful, despite the violence of her imprisonment. There was a nobility in her features that the history books had erased. "If I pull that spear," Jace said, "what happens to her?" "She is a monster." Jace, she does not matter. The core is worth 10 million credits. That clears your debt. That finds your sister. Do it. The transmission cut out. Jace stood there, the silence of the chamber pressing in on him. 10 million credits. It was freedom. It was his life back. It was Ilara. All he had to do was finish the execution. He looked at the spear. He reached out his hand. His glove hovered inches from the glowing metal. He thought about the mummified corpses in the crystal batteries outside. He thought about the sister he had lost to a classified operation. He thought about a government that built its holiness on a foundation of torture. He looked at the vampire queen. She is not a monster, he thought. She is a victim. Just like the rest of us. Yeah, that is not happening, Jace muttered. He lowered his hand from the spear and moved it to the console. System, he said. Override restraint protocols. Warning, the wristband replied. Restraints are class alpha. Override requires manual disengagement of safety interlocks. Do it, Jace snapped. He began to type, his fingers flying across the alien interface. He did not know the language, but he knew code, and he knew patterns. He bypassed the security firewalls, rerouting the power flow from the engine back into the grid. The chamber began to tremble. Dust fell from the darkness above. The cables holding the cross groaned, stretching taut, deep in the abyss. Something large began to awaken. Alert, the automated voice of the facility boomed, echoing off the obsidian walls. Containment breach. Stasis failure imminent. Jace kept typing. He unlocked the clamps on her hands, and with a sound like a gunshot, the star metal spears in her palms retracted. The cross shook violently. The woman's body slumped forward, held up only by the spear in her chest. One more. Jace gritted out, "Come on." He grabbed the handle of the heart spear. It was burning hot, searing the palm of his glove. Warning, his wristband screamed, "Failsafe detected. Cryogenic purge imminent." "I do not care," Jace yelled. He planted his feet on the platform. He gripped the spear with both hands. He pulled. For a second, nothing happened. The metal groaned. The engine flared, blindingly bright. Then, with a wet, sickening slide, the spear gave way. Jace stumbled back, the long shaft of star metal clattering to the floor. The cruciform engine flared to life, not with heat, but with cold. A shockwave of silent energy blasted outward. On the cross, Lithria's head snapped up, her eyes opened. They were not human eyes. They were twin eclipses, black sclera, with irises of burning violet fire. She looked directly at him, and then the failsafe triggered. A torrent of liquid cryocoolant, colder than the void between stars, flooded the platform. It erupted from the base of the cross, a tidal wave of white mist. He freed the crucified alien vampire queen after 1,000 years and froze instantly. Jace gasped, and the sound died in his throat. The cold hit him like a physical blow. It punched through his thermal suit, through his skin, into his marrow. He tried to run, but his legs were gone. He looked down. His boots were encased in rapidly expanding diamond-hard ice. The frost raced up his legs, consuming his knees, his hips, his chest. His breath crystallized in the air, hanging there like shattered glass. He could not blink. He could not scream. His heart hammered one final, sluggish time against his ribs and then stopped. The world turned white. The last thing he saw was the woman. She was falling from the cross. She did not hit the ground. She floated, caught in a gravity field of her own making. The cables tore away from her dress. The wounds in her hands were already closing. She drifted toward him, moving through the freezing mist like a phantom. She brought her face close to his visor. Her skin was flawless. Her fangs glinted in the dying light of the engine. Her eyes, Those terrible, beautiful eyes bored into his frozen soul. Her lips parted. He could not hear her with his ears. His auditory nerves were already dead. But he heard her in his mind. A voice like velvet over steel. Mine. Then the darkness took him. The chamber began to collapse. The obsidian spires cracked and fell into the abyss. The cruciform engine folded in on itself, plates shifting and rearranging, transforming from a prison into something else. From the depths of the ice, a structure rose. It was skeletal, organic, vast. A living starship, dormant for a millennium, answering the call of its mistress. It rose up and swallowed the platform. Biomech tendrils wrapped around the frozen statue of the human and the floating form of the queen. It cocooned them together, sealing them in a chrysalis of metal and flesh. The ship broke through the crust of the moon, shattering the ice, and ascended silently into the starless dark. Inside the cocoon, Jace slept the sleep of the dead, entombed with a monster who was just beginning to wake up. The first thing Jace felt was the heat. It was not the burning heat of a fire, nor the stifling humidity of a jungle. It was a wet, living warmth, like waking up inside a beating heart. He gasped, his lungs expanding with a violence that made his ribs ache. He expected to inhale ice crystals, to feel the razor-sharp bite of the vacuum he had died in. Instead, the air tasted thick, metallic, and sweet, like ozone mixed with copper. Jace scrambled backward, his hands slipping on a surface that felt disturbingly like muscle tissue. Easy, Jace, he told himself, though his voice came out as a ragged croak. You are dead. This is the afterlife. It is distinctively stickier than the brochures promised. He sat up, wiping a slurry of viscous, translucent fluid from his face. He was not in the ice cavern anymore. He was in a chamber that pulsed with a soft, rhythmic thrumming sound. The walls were not made of stone or steel. They were curved, organic structures, the color of bruised obsidian veined with glowing lines of silver light that pumped and flowed like blood vessels. He looked down at his chest. His thermal suit was gone, dissolved or stripped away. He was dressed in a simple, dark tunic made of a fabric he did not recognize, something that shifted and tightened against his skin like a second layer of dermis. He flexed his fingers. 10 minutes ago, they had been frozen solid. Now, they were warm. Too warm. He could feel his own pulse hammering in his fingertips, but it felt different. Faster. Stronger. Jay stood up, his legs shaking. The floor yielded slightly under his bare feet, warm and resilient. Where am I? He whispered. A section of the wall to his left rippled. It did not slide open like a door. It dilated like a pupil. A figure stepped through. Jay stopped breathing for the second time that day. It was her. Lithria, the woman from the cross. She was no longer the frozen, statuesque figure of terrified beauty he had seen in the ice. She was alive, and the difference was terrifying. She stood tall, her presence filling the small chamber like a storm front. The tattered remains of her crucifixion gown had vanished, replaced by armor that seemed to be growing directly out of her skin, plates of iridescent black chitin that covered her shoulders and torso, interlocking with the fluidity of mercury. But she was not whole. Jace could see the scars. Where the star metal spears had pierced her palms, there were jagged, starburst-shaped white marks against her silver skin. A similar, larger scar marred the center of her chest, right over her heart. She moved with a slight hitch, a stiffness that betrayed a deep, structural weakness. She stopped 3 paces from him. Her eyes, those twin eclipses of black and violet, locked onto his face. You are awake, she said. Her voice was not a single sound. It was layered, a harmonic chord of 3 distinct tones speaking in unison, one deep and resonant, one human range, and one a high, crystalline whisper that Jace felt in his teeth rather than heard. Jace blinked, his brain struggling to catch up with reality. I froze, he said stupidly. I felt my blood turn to slush. I died. You did. Lithria agreed. She took a step closer, and the air around her seemed to vibrate. The cryo-purge was designed to shatter any biological matter that attempted to breach the containment. It was effective. So I am a ghost? Jace asked, looking at his hands. Or is this a very elaborate hallucination caused by dying neurons? You are not a ghost, she said, tilting her head slightly, the obsidian horns curving back from her temples catching the dim light. And you are not hallucinating. You are repaired. Repaired, Jace repeated. I merged a fragment of my Sangui code into your biology, she said, as if explaining how to fix a toaster. My nanites, they reconstructed your cellular lattice, purged the ice crystallization, and restarted your autonomic functions. It was difficult. Your species is fragile. You break very easily. Jace stared at her. He looked at the veins in his wrist. Under the skin, if he squinted, he thought he could see a faint silver shimmer moving in time with his heartbeat. You put your blood in me, Jace said slowly. It was necessary, she replied. I required a pilot. The ship required a warm interface. You were the only available raw material. Jace let out a short, hysterical laugh. He ran a hand through his hair, which was dry and clean. So we are blood roommates now, he said. Is that it? I pay rent in plasma? Lithria frowned. The expression was not one of anger, but of genuine confusion. She processed the words, her eyes narrowing slightly as she searched for context in a 1,000-year-old lexicon. Roommates. She tested the word, the harmonics of her voice clashing slightly. You imply a cohabitation arrangement based on shared living space and divided financial burdens. It was a joke, Jace said, holding up a hand. Humor. It is a coping mechanism. I am freaking out, Your Highness. Amusement. She nodded slowly, filing the concept away. I see. You use absurdity to mask terror, a uniquely human trait. She turned and walked toward the wall, trailing her hand along the pulsating veins of light. Come, she commanded. We are not safe yet. Jace followed her, mostly because he had nowhere else to go. As he walked, he felt a strange sensation in the back of his mind. It was like hearing a radio playing in another room, a low, buzzing static of emotion that was not his own. He felt a flash of cold, sharp rage, then a wave of crushing, abyssal loneliness. Then a spike of adrenaline. He stopped, clutching his head. Whoa, he muttered. Lithria paused and looked back. You feel it. Feel what? Jace asked. I feel like I just chugged 5 energy drinks and then got punched in the gut. The bond, she said simply. The Sangui code does not just repair tissue, it binds. You carry my essence now. You are my anchor. She walked back to him, her movement fluid but weary. I have slept for 1,000 years, little scavenger, she said softly. My mind is vast, but my body is drained. Without an anchor to the waking world, I would slip back into the fugue state. Your blood grounds me, and in return, you are sustained by my vitality. Jace looked at her, really looked at her. Beneath the terrifying alien beauty, he saw the exhaustion, the way her shoulders slumped slightly when she thought he was not looking. The tremor in her hands. So if I die? Jace asked. Then I drift into madness. She said, and likely take this ship and everyone on it with me. Great, Jace said. No pressure. He reached out to steady himself against the wall. As his palm touched the warm, black material, the entire corridor lit up. The lights flared from dim silver to a bright, alerting gold. A low hum vibrated through the floor plates, sounding almost welcoming. The ship, Lithria said, her eyes widening slightly. It recognizes you. Jace pulled his hand back as if he had been burned. It felt me, he said. It felt like a cat leaning into a scratch. We are co-linked, she said. It accepts your command codes because they are written in my blood. They continued walking, the ship opening doors for them before they even reached them. They emerged onto what looked like a bridge. It was a spherical chamber with walls that were entirely transparent, or rather, the hull had become transparent, revealing the star field outside. In the center was not a chair, but a dais of raised, interwoven vines and neural interfaces. Lithria stepped onto the dais. The vines moved, coiling gently around her boots and calves, connecting her to the vessel. Jace walked to the edge of the transparency. Outside, the shattered remains of the ice moon drifted in silence. He could see the wreckage of the research station he had entered through. You destroyed the moon, he noted. The moon was a cage, she replied. I broke the bars. She closed her eyes, and the ship hummed louder. A holographic projection materialized in the air, not a flat screen, but a three-dimensional cloud of data points. Where are we going? Jace asked. Away, she said. Before they finish what they started. She gestured to the stars. They tell you I am a monster, do they not? She asked. The history books of your holy council. They say you ate worlds, Jace said, leaning against a console that looked like it was made of polished bone. They say you enslaved entire civilizations and drank them dry. They call it the era of Red Night. Lithria laughed. It was a bitter, sharp sound. The Sanguinari Dominion was not an empire of slaughter, she said. It was an ecosystem. We were long-lived, powerful, and technologically advanced. Lesser species, younger species like yours came to us. We offered protection. We offered medicine that could cure plagues you had not even named yet. We offered technology that could terraform dead rocks into gardens. And the price? Jace asked. Blood, she said, but not taken, given. It was a tax, a donation. A healthy adult human could give a pint every few months and never feel it. In exchange, they lived in a paradise free of war and disease. It was a symbiosis. Jace frowned. That is not what the priests teach in Sunday school. Of course not, Lithria spat. The ancestors of your holy council, they were the elites of humanity. Kings, corporate warlords, religious zealots. They hated us. Not because we were cruel, but because we made them irrelevant. Why bow to a human king when a vampire queen ensures your children never starve? She opened her eyes, and the fire in them was real. They conspired with a traitorous faction of my own court. They staged the massacres. They poisoned the blood supplies to drive my people mad with hunger. And then they pinned me to that engine to power their weapons. They stole my empire, Jace, and they built a church on top of the corpse to hide the crime. Jace looked out at the stars. He thought about the debts he owed. He thought about the sister who had vanished into a black site run by the council. He thought about the lies he had been fed since he was old enough to read. It fits, he admitted quietly. The council never does anything unless there is a profit margin or a power grab involved. A red light began to pulse on the bridge, accompanied by a discordant, shrieking alarm. Lithria stiffened. We have company. Jace looked at the sensor cloud. 3 sharp, red triangles had appeared on the edge of the system. They were moving fast, burning hard toward the debris field of the moon. Council ships, Jace said, his stomach tightening. Heavy cruisers. They are hunting us, Lithria said. The failsafe in the prison must have alerted the nearest patrol. Jace squinted at the holographic icons. He tapped the bone console, hoping it worked like a standard interface. To his surprise, the ship translated his intent, zooming the image. He saw the hull markings on the lead ship, a golden shield with a sword driven through a star. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," Jace muttered. "What is it?" Lithria asked, her hands moving in the air, manipulating invisible controls. "That insignia," Jace said, pointing to the 7th Celestial Vanguard. "That is my old unit." "Your unit?" Lithria paused. "You were a soldier for the enemy?" "I was a grunt," Jace corrected. "I fixed engines and shot at pirates. I did not know I was working for the bad guys, but those guys, they are elite. They do not take prisoners." A voice cut through the bridge, broadcasting on a wide-band frequency. It was amplified, booming, authoritarian, unidentified biovessel. "This is Commander Voss of the Holy Council warship, Purity of Will. You are in possession of a Class Omega heretical artifact. Power down your engines and prepare for boarding. Resistance will be met with immediate vaporization. Voss." Jace groaned. Of course it is Voss. The man would arrest his own mother for jaywalking. "Can we fight them?" Jace asked. Lithria shook her head. "Not yet. The ship is awake, but the weapon systems are at 5% capacity. I am not strong enough to channel the energy required for a lance strike." "Then we run," Jace said. "Can this thing move?" "Watch," Lithria said. She closed her eyes and inhaled sharply. The ship groaned, a sound like a whale song vibrating through the hull. The stars outside the transparency streaked. The ship surged forward, accelerating with a G-force that should have turned Jace into paste, but he felt nothing. The internal dampeners were absolute. They dove into the ice rings of a nearby gas giant, a chaotic river of tumbling boulders and frozen methane. "They are tracking our thermal signature," Jace yelled, watching the red triangles pursue them into the ring. "You are running too hot. The engine is glowing like a beacon. I cannot mask the heat signature while accelerating." Lithria snapped, beads of silver sweat forming on her brow. "The ship is still regenerating." Jace looked at the console. He saw a schematic of the ship. The outer layer of the hull was marked as ablative. Shed the skin," Jace said. "What?" Lithria looked at him. "The outer hull," Jace yelled. "It is biological, right? Like a snake? Shed the outer layer. Leave a cloud of hot biomass behind us. It will blind their sensors and give them a false target. It will leave us vulnerable," she argued. "It will leave us alive." "Do it." Lithria hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. She clenched her fists. The ship shuddered violently. Outside, large plates of the black chitinous hull detached. They drifted away, glowing with residual heat and venting steam. The Council missiles, locked onto the massive heat bloom, curved away from the main ship and slammed into the discarded hull fragments. Explosions blossomed in the ice ring, silent flowers of fire and debris. Jace watched the sensor display. The red triangles circled the debris cloud. Confused. "Hard turn. Starboard," Jace ordered. "Dive into the gas giant's atmosphere." Lithria obeyed, banking the ship sharply. They plunged into the swirling orange clouds of the planet below, vanishing from the scanner range of the cruisers. Silence returned to the bridge, save for the hum of the ship and the ragged sound of their breathing. "That..." Lithria exhaled, unhooking herself from the neural vines. "That was effective. Crude, but effective. We call it the dead man's decoy," Jace said, sliding down to sit on the floor. He was shaking. The adrenaline dump was hitting him hard. Remind me to never do that again. The ship leveled out, cruising deep within the cloud layer of the gas giant. They were safe, for the moment. Jace's wristband beeped. It was a low, insistent tone. He looked at it. A text file had been intercepted during the chaos. "What is that?" Lithria asked, stepping down from the dais. She walked unsteadily, using the railing for support. "I hacked their local comms network while we were running," Jace said. "Old habits. I wanted to see if they were calling for backup." He opened the file. His eyes scanned the text, and his blood ran cold. It was not a standard military alert. It was a priority message from the Council High Command to Commander Voss. Subject: asset recovery. Priority: absolute. Target: Project Resurrection. Orders: do not destroy the vessel. The Queen must be retrieved alive. The Subcommittee on Eschatological Risk requires her genetic sequence to initialize the war swarm. The excavator, asset Jace, was intended to trigger the awakening, confirm acquisition. Jace read it twice. The excavator was intended to trigger the awakening. They knew, Jace whispered. Lithria loomed over him. "What did you say?" "My boss," Jace said, looking up at her. "The corporate patron who sent me. He wasn't just a scavenger broker. He was working for them." He projected the text into the air. Lithria read it, her eyes narrowing into slits. "Subcommittee on Eschatological Risk." She read, "They did not want to destroy me. They wanted to wake me up." "They set me up," Jace said, anger rising in his chest, hot and bitter. "They sent me down there knowing I would trip the failsafe. They wanted you out of the box. Why?" "To initialize the war swarm," Lithria said. Her voice was hollow. "What is a war swarm?" Jace asked. "A weapon," she said. "A weapon I forbade my people from ever using. A self-replicating nanite plague that devours organic matter and converts it into soldiers. If the Council has found the dormant vaults, and if they have my genetic key." She swayed, her knees buckling. "Lithria!" Jace scrambled up and caught her before she hit the floor. She was heavy, her armor dense and cold, but her skin was burning up. She collapsed against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "I am depleted," she gasped. The escape, the regeneration, it cost too much energy. Jace held her, feeling the terrifying heat radiating from her core. She felt fragile, despite the armor. "What do you need?" Jace asked. "Is there a med bay? A recharge socket?" She looked up at him. Her eyes were hazy, the violet fire dimming, her lips parted, and he saw the glint of her fangs. They were fully extended now. "I need sustenance," she whispered. Jace froze. He understood. "Oh," he said. "Right. Vampire." He looked at her neck, then at his own arm. He could feel the pulse in his wrist, steady and strong. He looked at the woman who had just saved his life, the woman who had been tortured for 1,000 years. "You saved me," he said. "I guess I owe you a drink." He pulled back the sleeve of his tunic. He held his wrist out to her. "Do not kill me, okay? I have debts to pay." Lithria looked at the offered wrist. Her nostrils flared, smelling the blood beneath the skin. A look of intense hunger crossed her face, warring with a deep, ancient shame. "I will not take too much," she promised. Her voice trembled. She took his hand. Her grip was strong, her fingers cool against his skin. She brought his wrist to her lips. Jace turned his head away, bracing for pain. He felt the sharp, quick prick of her fangs piercing his skin. It hurt for a millisecond, like a needle stick. Then, the pain vanished. It was replaced by a rush of endorphins that hit Jace like a tidal wave. It was not just physical pleasure. It was a psychic connection that blasted open the doors between their minds. He felt her relief. It tasted like cool water after a week in the desert. He felt her gratitude, warm and golden. He felt the power rushing back into her, knitting her cells together. And she felt him. He knew she could feel his fear, his confusion, and beneath it all, a strange magnetic pull toward her. Jace gasped, his knees going weak. He slumped against the console, sliding down to the floor, pulling her down with him. She drank deeply, her throat working. The sensation was dizzying. It was intimate in a way Jace had never experienced. It was closer than sex. It was two life forces mixing, spiraling around each other. For a moment, the predator and prey dynamic vanished. They were just two drowning people sharing a single breath. Jace turned his head back. He watched her. Her eyes were closed, her lashes fluttering against her cheeks. She looked peaceful. Then, her eyes snapped open. She realized how good it felt. She realized she wanted more. She realized she could drain him dry right here, right now, and it would feel wonderful. With a cry of horror, Lithria tore herself away. She scrambled backward across the floor, wiping her mouth. A smear of bright red blood stained her silver chin. Enough, she gasped. Enough. Jace sat there, dazed, holding his wrist. The wound was already closing, sealed by the nanites she had given him. He felt lightheaded, floaty. Whoa. He breathed. Lithria was breathing hard, her back pressed against the far wall. She looked terrified of herself, and she whispered. I almost did not stop. Jace shook his head, trying to clear the fog. It was okay. I am okay. It is not okay, she snapped. Her voice fractured into 3 discordant tones. You are my anchor. If I consume you, I am lost. And yet, the hunger. She buried her face in her hands. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. It was heavy with danger and guilt and a lingering electric charge of attraction that neither of them wanted to acknowledge. Jace looked at his wrist. Then he looked at her. He decided to do the only thing he knew how to do when things got too real. He cracked a joke. You know, he said, his voice a little raspy. On my world, people usually buy a girl dinner before she bites them. It is considered polite. Lithria lowered her hands. She stared at him, bewildered. Buy dinner? She repeated. You wish to exchange currency for food? It is a metaphor, Jace said, struggling to his feet. He felt a little wobbly, but alive. I mean, usually there is a date involved. Maybe a movie, some awkward conversation. Lithria looked at him as if he were a puzzle she could not solve. What kind of food, she asked slowly, is more valuable than live blood? Jace laughed. It was a weak sound, but it broke the tension. I do not know, he said. A really good steak? Some synthetic noodles? I have not eaten in 12 hours. So right now, I would trade a pint of blood for a sandwich. Lithria stared at him for a long moment. Then, the corner of her mouth twitched, a ghost of a smile. You are ridiculous. Jace the scavenger, she said. I am alive. Jace the scavenger, he corrected. Thanks to you, and you are alive thanks to me. So, we are even. He walked over to the console, moving carefully. He brought up the star map. We cannot stay here, he said, his voice turning serious. The council knows you are awake. They know I am with you, and they are going to send the whole fleet. Lithria stood up. She wiped the blood from her chin with the back of her hand, her demeanor shifting from vulnerable back to regal. Then we must find out why, she said. We must find this. Subcommittee. Jace tapped a sector on the map. Here, he said. The RIM-9 data hub. It is a border world. Smugglers, mercenaries, and corrupt officials. It is where all the dirty data from the Outer Rim gets processed before it goes to the capital. Why there? She asked. Because that is where the order came from, Jace said. The routing code on the message. It originated from a secure server on RIM-9. If we can get in there, we can find out who signed the order. We can find out who is pulling the strings. Infiltration, Lithria mused. I was once a master of court intrigue, but I fear my face is memorable. Jace looked at her, at the horns, the silver skin, the armor. Yeah, he said. We are going to need a disguise, and maybe a hood. A really big hood. Lithria stepped up beside him. She looked at the map, then at him. You are willing to do this? She asked. You could run. I could drop you at the next station. You could disappear. Jace touched the pocket of his jacket, feeling the outline of his sister's hollow frame. They took my sister, he said quietly. The council. And now they tried to kill me, and they tortured you for 1,000 years. He looked at Lithria. I am not running, he said. I am tired of running. Let's go burn their house down. Lithria looked at him, and for the first time, there was no hunger in her eyes. Only respect. Very well, Jace, she said. Set a course for the border. The living ship hummed in agreement, turning its bow toward the dark edge of the galaxy. The RIM-9 data hub was not a place where people went to find themselves. It was a place where people went to get lost, usually permanently. The station hung in the void like a tumor on the edge of civilized space, a chaotic accretion of rusted docking rings, unauthorized habitat modules, and venting plasma refineries. It smelled, even through the sensors, of ozone, burnt lubricant, and desperation. Jace sat in the pilot's harness of the living ship, watching the station rotate slowly on the main view screen. The ship, which Lithria had named the Night Singer in a moment of nostalgic melancholy, was currently doing its best impression of a piece of drifting space junk. Its sleek biomechanical hull had dulled to a matte, pitted gray. The glowing veins of starlight were dimmed to near invisibility. To any passing patrol, it looked like the carcass of a mining hauler that had been gutted by pirates a decade ago. Are you sure this camouflage will hold? Jace asked, adjusting the collar of his coat. It was a new acquisition from the ship's fabricators, looking suitably worn and greasy, though it felt like silk against his skin. It will hold. Lithria's voice came from the darkness behind him. The ship is altering its thermal output to match a decaying reactor core. To their sensors, we are radioactive scrap. Jace turned the chair around. Lithria stood in the shadows of the bridge archway. She had changed. The terrifying regal armor was gone, replaced by a heavy hooded cloak made of a dark, coarse weave. But it was her face that made Jace blink. The nanites in her blood, the sanguine code, had shifted her bone structure. The obsidian horns that usually crowned her temples had retracted, sinking beneath her skin. Her fangs were shortened, looking almost human. Her skin, usually the color of moonlight on snow, had darkened to a pale, sickly gray, like someone suffering from chronic void sickness. She looked smaller, mortal. How do I look? She asked. Her voice was flat, stripped of its usual harmonic resonance. Like a smuggler's widow, Jace said honestly, or a fugitive. Which fits. I feel contained, she murmured, raising a hand to touch her face. To hide one's nature is a heaviness I had forgotten. It is better than being shot on sight, Jace said, standing up. He checked the heavy kinetic pistol holstered at his hip. And down there? Being a nobody is the best armor you can have. They docked at one of the lower-level maintenance rings, bypassing the official customs gates where the Holy Council's ident scanners would be waiting. The airlock hissed open, and the smell of the station hit them instantly. It was a physical wall of scent, recycled air, frying synthetic meat, cheap propellant, and the sweat of a million beings living on top of one another. Lithria flinched. She stopped in the threshold, her hand gripping the doorframe so hard the metal groaned. "What is it?" Jace whispered, leaning in close. "Too loud," she hissed through her teeth. Her eyes, hidden deep within her hood, were darting frantically. "The heartbeats. I can hear them all." Jace looked out at the crowded concourse. It was a sea of humanity and aliens, a crushing tide of life. To him, it was just noise. To her, it must have sounded like a dinner bell ringing in an echo chamber. "Focus on me," Jace said, stepping in front of her to block her view. "Just listen to my heartbeat. You know the rhythm. Tune the rest out." Lithria closed her eyes. She took a deep, shuddering breath, inhaling the scent of him, oil, anxiety, and the blood she had tasted only hours ago. "Anchor," she whispered. "Yeah, I am your anchor," Jace said. "Now let's move before the dockmaster realizes his scrap pile just walked away." They moved through the station like oil through water. Jace took the lead, his shoulders hunched, weaving through the throngs of traders, pilgrims, and mercenaries. Lithria followed in his wake, a silent shadow. She struggled. Jace could feel it through their bond, a constant low-level static of predatory agitation. Every time a stranger brushed past her, he felt her muscles coil, the instinct to strike flaring hot and fast before she clamped it down. She was a tiger walking through a herd of gazelles, starving and leashed only by her own will. They reached the lower markets, a neon-lit nightmare of black market data stalls and chop shops. This was Jace's element. He navigated the maze of stalls until he found a door marked with a glowing blue graffiti tag, a laughing skull with binary code in its eyes. He knocked, 3 rapid taps, 1 slow. The door slid open, revealing a room that smelled of burnt silicon and energy drinks. Walls of monitors displayed code cascades, security feeds, and pirated entertainment channels. Sitting in a hover chair in the center of the chaos was a creature that looked like a spider made of wires. "Vex," Jace called out, stepping over a pile of stripped server cores. The chair spun around. A human face, pale and unshaven, peered out from a headset that looked surgically attached. "Jace, the Tomb Raider," Vex crowed, his voice amplified by a vocoder. "I heard you froze to death on a rock in Sector 7. I was about to hack your bank account and claim my inheritance. You are not in my will, Vex," Jace said, grinning. Vex's eyes, magnified by heavy goggles, slid to Lithria. He whistled low. "And who is the heavy lifter? You finally afford a bodyguard droid? Or is this one of those bio-sculpted concubines from the pleasure moons?" Lithria's head snapped up. Jace felt a spike of cold rage travel down the bond. "She is a client," Jace said quickly, stepping between them. "A very wealthy, very private noblewoman with some extensive body modifications. She needs information, Vex, and she pays in raw platinum." Vex's eyes widened. He spun back to his console. "Platinum talks. Jace walks. What do you need?" "We need access to the restricted archives," Jace said, leaning over the console. "Specifically the military logistics logs from the last 48 hours, and the historical database on the Holy Council's founding. The unedited version." Vex laughed. "Unedited? Buddy, that does not exist. The Council scrubs that data every 10 minutes. It exists here." Lithria spoke for the first time. Her voice was low, rasping, but it carried an authority that made Vex stop typing. The border nodes store the raw cache before the filters are applied. You know this. Vex paused. He looked at her, really looked at her, sensing something off about the noblewoman story, but too greedy to care. You know your tech, lady. Okay. It will take 10 minutes to slice the firewall. Don't touch anything. Jace and Lithria stood in the back of the room while Vex worked. The screens reflected in Lithria's eyes a waterfall of data. He is irritating, she whispered to Jace. Can I eat him? No eating the help, Jace whispered back. We need him. Got it, Vex shouted. Jace rushed to the screen. Here's the log for your retrieval order, Vex said, pointing a grease-stained finger at the screen. Order Origin, Subcommittee on Eschatological Risk and Priority Alpha. Jace scanned the file. There it was, his name. Asset designation, Jace Valerius. Status, deniable, expendable. Probability of survival, 0.4%. Expendable. Jace read aloud. The word tasted like ash. I worked for them for 5 years. I never asked questions. I never missed a deadline. And I was just meat to trip a wire. He felt a hand on his shoulder. Lithria's touch was heavy, grounding. Look deeper, she commanded Vex. Look for the resurrection contingency. Vex typed furiously. Whoa, this is deep code. Black level. Here. A file opened. It was a schematic. Jace stared at it. It was a blueprint for a soldier, but not a human soldier. The anatomy was twisted, enhanced, fused with machinery. Vex read the header. Project Blood Iron. The Council has been breeding these things in secret labs for centuries. They are using retro-engineered DNA from an extinct species designation. From vampires, Jace said, his stomach turning. They are making their own vampires. Lithria leaned forward, her hood falling back slightly. Her eyes were burning. Scroll down, she ordered. Vex obeyed, terrified by the tone. The screen displayed a massive fleet movement. Thousands of dormant drone ships hidden in the dark space between stars. War Swarm Protocol. The screen read. Activation key. Sangui Code Sequence Alpha Prime. Status. Awaiting input. That is your blood, Jace realized. They stole your blood when they crucified you. They used it to program a plague. They did not just steal it, Lithria whispered. The air in the room began to drop in temperature. They weaponized me. They took the gift I gave to heal worlds and turned it into a gun pointed at the head of the galaxy. The lights in the room flickered. The monitors distorted, static washing over the images. Vex yelped as sparks showered from his console. Hey, your lady friend is frying my rig. What kind of mods is she running? Lithria was not listening. She was vibrating with a rage so ancient and deep it felt like the room was shaking. Her nanites were flaring, reaching out to the nearest technology, seeking to destroy. Lithria. Jace grabbed her by the shoulders. He spun her around to face him. Her eyes were fully violet, the pupils gone. Her fangs had extended, tearing through the illusion she had cast. They made me a monster, she snarled, the voice of the queen breaking through the disguise. They built horrors in my name. I should tear this station apart. I should show them what a true monster looks like. No, Jace shouted, gripping her tighter. Look at me. Not at the screen. Look at me. He forced her to meet his gaze. He could feel the heat radiating off her skin, the hum of power that wanted to explode outward. That is what they want, Jace said, his voice dropping to a fierce, urgent whisper. They want you to be the monster. Do not give them the satisfaction. Lithria trembled in his grip. She looked at his hands on her shoulders, then up at his face. She saw the fear there, but also the stubbornness, the refusal to let go. Jace, she gasped, the violet light in her eyes dimming slightly. It hurts. The betrayal, it burns. I know, Jace said softly. I know. But burning down a hacker's den won't fix it. We fix it by stopping them. The lights stabilized. Vex peered over his console, looking terrified. Guys? He squeaked. I think that power surge just tripped the station's silent alarm. We have company. On the main security feed, a squad of armored troopers was moving down the corridor. They wore the white and gold of the Holy Council, and they were carrying plasma rifles. Time to go, Jace said, pulling Lithria toward the back exit. Vex, wipe the drive! Way ahead of you, Vex shouted, smashing a physical kill switch on his desk. Get out of here, and take your terrifying girlfriend with you. They burst out of the back door into a maintenance corridor just as the front door exploded inward. Movement was difficult. The corridor was narrow, cluttered with pipes and cables. Up, Jace yelled, pointing to a vertical access shaft. 0G maintenance tunnels. They scrambled up the ladder, Jace shoving the hatch open. They pulled themselves through into a wide, cylindrical tunnel running the length of the station's spine. Here. The gravity was disabled to allow for moving heavy cargo. Jace kicked off the wall, floating free. He was used to 0G. It was a salvager's playground. But Lithria. She moved like she was born in the void. She didn't just float, she glided. She pushed off a bulkhead, her cloak billowing around her like wings, twisting in midair to land silently on a support strut. Drones! Jace shouted. A swarm of security drones buzzed into the tunnel behind them, red lasers sweeping the darkness. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, burning ozone trails. Jace fired back with his kinetic pistol, the recoil spinning him backward. He caught a handhold, steadied himself, and put a round through a drone's sensor eye. Go! He yelled. They flew through the tunnel, dodging debris and support beams. Ahead, a group of maintenance workers in religious robes blocked the path. They were chanting, swinging heavy wrenches. Heretics! One of them screamed, pointing at Lithria. The demon! We saw the face of the demon. They lunged. Lithria did not slow down. She twisted in the air, avoiding a swinging wrench with impossible grace. She grabbed the attacker by the collar and flung him, gently, Jace noted, into the padded wall. She could have torn his head off, Jace thought as he vaulted over another zealot. She is holding back. They reached the cargo loading bay at the end of the tunnel. It was sealed. Jace, the lock! Lithria shouted, bracing herself against the door frame as more drones poured into the tunnel. I am on it. Jace slapped a decryption puck onto the keypad. Bolt fire hammered the wall around Lithria. She raised a hand, and the air shimmered. A faint shield of nanites deflected the shots, but Jace could see the strain on her face. She was still weak. Open! Jace yelled as the light turned green. The airlock cycled open. They tumbled into a bay filled with pressurized cargo pods. We cannot get back to the ship on foot, Jace said, looking at the tactical map on his wrist. They have cut off the docks. Lithria looked at the cargo pods. Then she looked at the magnetic rail launcher that fired them into orbit. We mail ourselves, she said. Jace grinned. That is the worst idea I have ever heard. I love it. They cracked open a pod labeled industrial lubricant. It was tight. They squeezed inside, Jace pulling the hatch shut just as the security team breached the bay. Launch it! Jace keyed the internal override. The magnetic rail engaged with a hum that vibrated through their bones. Hold on! The pod accelerated from 0 to 4,000 in 3 seconds. The G-force slammed them together. Jace was pressed back against the wall of the pod, and Lithria was pressed against him. They shot out of the station, a bullet fired into the dark. Night Singer! Lithria commanded, her voice strained by the crush of gravity. Catch us! Through the small viewport, Jace saw the derelict shape of their ship peel away from the station. Tractor beams, invisible and gentle, reached out and snagged their pod, reeling them in like a fish on a line. The pod thudded into the ship's cargo bay. Silence returned. Jace popped the hatch. They spilled out onto the deck of the Night Singer, gasping for air. We made it, Jace wheezed, lying on his back. Lithria did not answer. She stood up, ripping off the heavy cloak. She threw it across the bay. She began to pace, her boots striking the floor with rhythmic, angry precision. They use my face, she whispered. Jace sat up. What? In the data core, she said, her voice trembling. I saw the propaganda files. They use my face as the symbol of the devil. For 1,000 years, mothers have scared their children with stories of Lithria the Devourer. They have made me the face of all evil. She stopped pacing and looked at Jace. Her eyes were wide, manic. If I am already the monster, Jace, why should I not be one? She took a step toward him. I could turn this ship around. I could fly back to that station and vent the atmosphere. I could reclaim my throne on a mountain of skulls, and it would be so easy. It is what they expect. It is what they deserve. Jace stood up slowly. He approached her, ignoring the predator instinct screaming at him to run. He stopped inches from her. I was in the war, Jace said softly. The border skirmishes. I saw good men do that. They got tired of being afraid. So they decided to be terrifying instead. They burned villages. They executed prisoners. They said it was necessary. They said it made them powerful. He reached out and took her hand. It was cold. It did not end the war, Lithria. It just made sure that when they came home, they had nowhere left to go, because they had burned their own souls down along with the enemy. Lithria looked at their joined hands. She looked at him. I am afraid, she admitted, her voice breaking. I am afraid that if I do not become the monster, I will be the victim again. You are not a victim, Jace said, and you are not a monster. You are the queen who broke the chains. Be that. She looked up at him. The rage was fading, replaced by something else. Something hotter, more volatile. You scare me. Jace Valerius, she whispered. Good. Jace smiled weakly. You scare the hell out of me too. The air between them changed. It shifted from the sharp tang of combat to a heavy, suffocating heat. Lithria took a step closer. She was taller than him, but in this moment, she seemed to lean into him, seeking his warmth. Being near you, she murmured, her gaze dropping to his mouth. It is a constant torment. The sound of your pulse, the scent of life, it maddens me. Then go, Jace said, his voice barely a whisper. Walk away, I cannot, she said. She moved faster than he could react. One hand tangled in his hair, the other gripping his waist, pulling him flush against her. She kissed him. It was not a gentle movie star kiss. It was desperate. It was hungry. Her lips were cool, but her mouth was hot. Jace gasped, opening to her, and felt the sharp electric graze of her fangs against his lower lip. It was a kiss that rode the razor's edge between passion and violence. Jace gripped her armor, pulling her closer, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He felt her desire crashing through the bond. It was a chaotic mix of want and need and take. She pressed him back against the bulkhead, her leg hooked around his, pinning him. The world narrowed down to the taste of her, the smell of ozone and ancient spices, the dangerous pressure of her body against his. Jace's hand moved to her neck, his thumb brushing the pulse point. That touch seemed to snap something in her. Lithria tore herself away with a gasp that sounded like a sob. She stumbled back, chest heaving. Her hand flew to her mouth, covering her lips. Her eyes were wide with horror. She choked out, I wanted to drain you. Jace stood there, leaning against the wall, his breath coming in ragged, tearing sounds. He touched his lip. A tiny drop of blood came away on his finger. Lithria. No, she shouted, backing away. Do not come closer. In that moment, the surrender, I wanted to take everything. I wanted to drink until your heart stopped. She looked at him with devastation in her eyes. I am the monster, she whispered. Then she turned and fled. She ran from the cargo bay, vanishing into the dark corridors of the ship, leaving Jace alone in the silence. He slid down the wall to the floor. He put his head in his hands. He was shaking. He was terrified. And God help him, he wanted her back. The ship's internal chronometer cycled to the morning shift. The lights in the mess hall brightened slowly, simulating a dawn. Jace sat at the table, staring at a cup of synthetic coffee he hadn't touched. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt the ghost of her mouth on his. The door swished open. Lithria entered. She had removed the armor again, wearing a simple tunic and trousers the ship had fabricated. She looked composed, regal, her hair pulled back in a severe braid, but her eyes were tired. She walked to the table and sat opposite him. She did not look at the coffee. She looked at his hands. I apologize, she said stiffly. For last night. For the loss of control. It will not happen again. Jace looked up. Don't, he said. Do not what? Do not apologize for being what you are, Jace said, and do not pretend it didn't happen. Lithria looked away, staring out the viewport at the stars streaking by in warp. I could have killed you, she said softly. I care for you too much to risk that. I should distance myself. Jace reached across the table. He waited until she looked at him, then he covered her hand with his. Love is always a risk. Lithria, he said. She frowned. That is a platitude. No, it is the truth, Jace said. Mortals risk heartbreak. Soldiers risk betrayal, and we risk exsanguination. It is just a different kind of danger. He squeezed her hand. I am not asking for safe, Jace said. I never liked safe. I am asking you to stay, to try. Lithria looked at his hand covering hers. She turned her hand over, interlacing her fingers with his. Her skin was cool, but it warmed at his touch. You are a foolish man, she said, a small, sad smile touching her lips. Maybe, Jace agreed. But I am your foolish man. They sat in silence for a moment, the bond between them settling into a hum of quiet comfort. The storm had passed, leaving the air clear. So, Jace said, pulling his hand back and picking up his coffee. The council, the war swarm. Lithria straightened, the queen returning. Yes, she said. The data from the station. She tapped the table, and a hologram projected from the surface. It showed a star map with a glowing red trajectory. The coordinates lead to the capital system, she said, specifically to Horus Primus, the throne world. That is where the war swarm is hidden? Jace asked. It is where the control signal originates, she corrected. If they have the protocol, they will need a transmission tower powerful enough to broadcast it to the dormant fleets across the galaxy. There is only one such tower, the Spire of the Ascendant, Jace said. The Holy Council's headquarters. Exactly, Lithria said. She looked at the map, her expression hardening. We are not just running anymore. Jace, if we do not stop them, they will activate the swarm. They will unleash a plague that will consume every free world, and they will do it in my name. So we go to the heart of the beast, Jace said. We go to the capital. Lithria nodded. We go to the capital, she said, and we show them that the truth is far more dangerous than any lie. She stood up, set a course, pilot. Jace downed his cold coffee and stood up, snapping a mock salute. I, your majesty. As they walked to the bridge together, side by side, Jace noticed she didn't pull away when their arms brushed. The fear was still there, but the resolve was stronger. They were walking into the fire, but at least they were walking together. Ares Primus did not look like a planet. It looked like a piece of jewelry that had been dropped into the velvet black of space. From the viewport of the Night Singer, Jace looked down at the capital world of the Holy Council. It was breathtaking in the most literal sense. It sucked the air right out of his lungs. The planet was ringed not by ice or dust, but by a constructed halo of golden megastructures. Cathedrals the size of continents floated in high orbit, tethered to the surface by elevators of spun diamond glass. The night side of the world didn't sleep. It glowed with a grid of city lights so dense it looked like a burning ember. It is beautiful, Jace admitted, leaning against the transparent steel, in a tyrannical, overcompensating sort of way. Lithria stood beside him. She was not looking at the architecture. She was looking at the atmospheric shield that girdled the equator. Projected onto the clouds, visible from orbit, was a hologram larger than a moon. It depicted a woman. She had horns that curled like ram's horns, skin the color of a bruise, and a mouth full of needle teeth that dripped gore. In the loop, the giantess was crushing a city in her bare hands, devouring tiny, screaming figures. Beneath the image, burning in letters of fire, was the script. The devourer wakes. Faith is your shield. Lithria flinched. It was a small movement, a tightening of her jaw, a turning of her shoulder. But Jace felt the shockwave of it through their blood bond. It felt like being slapped. They made me ugly, she whispered. Jace looked from the hologram to the woman standing next to him. Even in her simple ship suit, with her hair pulled back and her posture rigid, she was the most striking thing in the system. They made you a cartoon, Jace corrected. That is not you. That is a bedtime story to scare kids into eating their vegetables and tithing 10% of their income. It is effective, she said, her voice hollow. Look at it. I am not a person to them. I am an idea. I am the dark so that they can claim to be the light. She turned away from the window, unable to watch the digital caricature of herself swallow another city. We have an invitation to acquire, she said, her tone snapping back to business. Is the camouflage ready? We are a diplomatic courier ship from the fringe, Jace said, checking the transponder codes Vex had forged for them. And we are late for the party. The Synod celebration was the social event of the millennium. It was held in the Hall of Celestial Harmony, a gravity-defying structure suspended between two of the orbital cathedrals. The floor was transparent, offering a view of the planet turning slowly beneath the dancers' feet. Jace tugged at the collar of his formal tunic. It was high-necked, stiff, and embroidered with uncomfortable gold thread. He felt like a child playing dress-up in his father's uniform. I hate this, he muttered, keeping his voice low as they ascended the grand staircase. I feel like an imposter. I am going to use the wrong fork and start an intergalactic war. Beside him, Lithria did not look like an imposter. She wore a gown of midnight blue velvet that seemed to absorb the light. It was cut high at the neck and long in the sleeves, hiding her scars and the pale tint of her skin. Her hair was piled high in an intricate weave, threaded with pearls that obscured the points of her ears. The nanite masking dulled her fangs and softened the angles of her face, but it could not hide the way she moved. She moved like a predator pacing a cage. "Relax, Jace," she murmured, taking his arm. Her grip was iron-strong beneath the velvet glove. "You look acceptable." "Acceptable?" Jace raised an eyebrow. "I was going for dashing, maybe ruggedly handsome." "You clean up almost predatory," she teased, a glint of amusement in her eyes. "It suits you. Now stand straight. You are a scholar bodyguard to the Lady Valerius of the Outer Rim. You are supposed to look dangerous but bored." "I can do bored," Jace said. They reached the top of the stairs and the herald announced their fake names. No one looked up. The hall was filled with thousands of the galaxy's elite, senators in floating chairs, bishops in robes of iridescent silk, corporate warlords dripping in jewels. The air smelled of expensive perfume and hypocrisy. Choirs of genetically modified castrati sang from floating platforms, their voices weaving a tapestry of sound that glorified the council's history. And from the darkness she came, the Queen of Night, to drink the stars, and by the light were we saved. Lithria stiffened against him. "Easy," Jace whispered. "It is just a song. It is a lie set to music," she hissed back. They moved into the crowd. Their goal was the High Archive, located beneath the main floor, but they had to wait for the security rotation to cycle. Until then, they had to mingle. A senator with a face like a melted candle drifted past, nodding to Lithria. "Lady Valerius," he oozed. "A pleasure. I do not believe we have met. You have the bone structure of the old bloodlines." Lithria smiled. It was a terrifying smile, sharp and cold. "My family is very old, senator, and very private. We find the glare of the capital distasteful." The senator blinked, unsettled, and drifted away. "You are enjoying this," Jace noted. "I am remembering," she said softly. The court was always a battlefield. The weapons were just different, words instead of plasma, glances instead of knives. The music changed. The choir fell silent, replaced by a live orchestra playing a slow, sweeping waltz. "May I?" Jace asked, holding out his hand. "We need to blend in. Standing around looking like we want to murder everyone is suspicious." Lithria looked at his hand. "I do not know this dance. It is easy," Jace said. "Follow my lead. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. She took his hand. He pulled her onto the floor. At first, she was stiff, but as Jace counted the rhythm under his breath, something happened. The bond between them flared. He didn't need to speak the steps, he just thought them. And her body responded. She moved with a fluid grace that made the other dancers look clumsy. She anticipated his turns before he made them. They spun across the glass floor, the planet rotating beneath them, locked in a perfect synchronization. Jace looked into her eyes. The violet fire was dim, hidden by the disguise, but he could feel the intensity of her gaze. "You are leading," he whispered. "I am the queen," she replied, her voice a low hum in his mind. "I never follow." For a moment, the mission disappeared. The danger disappeared. There was just the heat of her hand in his, the swirl of the blue velvet, and the impossible reality that he was dancing with a myth. People stopped to watch. They were a striking pair, the rugged human with the scar on his jaw and the tall, imperious woman who moved like smoke. "We are drawing attention," Jace warned, dipping her low. "Good," she said. "If they are looking at us, they are not looking at the service entrance." As the music crested and fell, she spun out of his arms and toward the side of the ballroom. Jace followed, slipping a jamming device from his pocket. The service door was guarded by a biolock. Jace tapped the jammer against the panel. The light blinked from red to green. "Ladies first," he said. They slipped into the corridor, leaving the music and the light behind. The high archive was a mausoleum of data. Rows of crystalline server blocks stretched into the darkness, cooled by liquid nitrogen that rolled along the floor in heavy white clouds. Jace shivered. It reminded him too much of the ice moon. "This way," Lithria said. She was guided not by sight but by memory. "The layout of the foundation, it matches my own palace. They built their holy city on top of my home. They descended 3 levels to the restricted section. The door here was thick blast steel, marked with the seal of the High Council." Jace pulled out Vex's decryption drive. "This is going to take a minute." He worked the lock, sweat prickling on his forehead. Lithria stood guard, her head tilted, listening to the hum of the servers. "Got it," Jace said. The door groaned open. Inside, there was a single terminal. It was old, ancient. The interface was not holographic, but physical keys and a flat screen. Lithria approached it slowly. She brushed the dust from the console. "This is Sanguinari tech," she whispered. "They kept it." She placed her hand on the panel. The DNA reader sampled her skin. Identity confirmed. A mechanical voice spoke. "Welcome, Apex." She accessed the history files, not the public ones, but the source logs. "Show me the trial," she commanded. The screen flickered. A video file began to play. It was the same scene Jace had seen on the moon, but clear, unedited. Lithria stood in the center of the council chamber. She was not bound. She was speaking with passion, her hands gesturing to a holographic map of the galaxy. "We cannot continue as masters and cattle," the past Lithria said. "The blood tithe must be voluntary. We must share our medical technology with the younger races. If we do not evolve, we are simply parasites. I propose a Grand Senate, shared governance, a new age of cooperation." The camera panned to the council members. They were human, and they looked furious. "Heresy!" one of them shouted. "You would give our power to the dirt farmers? To the short lives?" "I would give them dignity," Lithria countered. The recording jumped forward. It showed the betrayal. The same council members, signing a document. Subject, Apex. The text read, "Resolution, liquidation implies martyrdom. Solution, eternal incarceration. Fabrication of narrative required. Rebrand subject as the devourer. Utilize subject's biological mass to power the sector defense grid." And then, a second document, Project War Swarm. Jace read aloud, "Utilization of Apex Sangui code to create autonomous nanite fleet. Activation trigger. Re-emergence of Apex signature. Purpose, controlled cataclysm to justify absolute martial law." Jace felt sick. "They did not just frame you," he said. "They planned this. They waited 1,000 years for someone to wake you up, just so they could unleash a plague and say, 'Look, the monster is back. Only we can save you.' They needed a boogeyman," Lithria whispered, "and they kept me on ice until they needed a fresh scare." She was trembling. The terminal screen illuminated her face, which was wet with tears she did not seem to notice. "My dream," she choked out. "My dream of peace. They turned it into a weapon. They turned me into the devil." She turned away from the screen and walked out of the vault. She did not stop. She walked past Jace, out of the archives, and toward the exterior balcony. "Lithria!" Jace called, chasing after her. She burst out onto the balcony. The wind of the high atmosphere whipped her hair and cloak. Below them, the city burned with golden light, the propaganda holograms still churning in the sky. She gripped the railing. Her knuckles were white. "Lithria, come back inside," Jace said. approaching her slowly. Maybe they were right, she said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. Jace stopped. Right about what? To fear me, she said. She looked out at the city. I look at this monument to lies, and I do not want to save them. I want to burn it all. I want to open my veins and let the nanites consume every stone, every golden spire, every smiling liar in that ballroom. She turned to him. Her eyes were burning violet, the contact lenses melting away from the heat of her rage. I feel like the monster they say I am. Jace. Jace stepped close to her. He did not flinch from the fire in her eyes. He reached out and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her in. She stiffened, her body rigid as a statue. Maybe they were right to fear what you could become, Jace said, his voice steady against the wind. You have the power to break worlds. That is scary. He rested his chin on the top of her head. But they never gave you the chance to become anything else, he said. They decided your story for you. Do not let them write the ending. Lithria let out a sound that was half sob, half growl. She slumped against him, her forehead resting on his chest. I am so tired, Jace, she whispered. 1,000 years of darkness. And I wake up to this. Jace held her. He rubbed her back, feeling the tension in her spine. I know, he said. But you are not alone in the dark anymore. She pulled back slightly, looking up at him. The despair in her eyes was mixed with something else, a desperate, hungry intensity. Jace, she said, there is a way to end the fear. What? Join me, she said. She stepped closer, her hands coming up to cup his face. Her touch was electric. Become my consort, not just an anchor, a true bond. I can rewrite your biology. I can stop your aging. We would share everything. My power would be your power. My mind would be your mind. You would never be cold, never be weak, never be alone again. The offer hung in the air between them. Immortality. Jace looked at her lips, then into her eyes. He felt the pull of the bond they already shared. It was a faint echo. What she was describing was a symphony. He thought about the cold nights on the salvage ship, the loneliness, the feeling of being small and powerless in a galaxy that crushed people like him. He could be a king. He could be with her, forever. It was the most tempting thing he had ever heard. But then he looked at the city below. He looked at the vast alien intellect behind her eyes. If I do that, Jace asked softly, will I still be Jace? Or will I just be a part of Lithria? Lithria hesitated. The silence stretched. We would be one, she said. The distinction becomes irrelevant. Jace stepped back, gently removing her hands from his face. I think the distinction matters, he said. I want to be with you, Lithria, but I want to be me with you, not just an extension of your will. She looked hurt, but she nodded slowly. You value your fragility, she said. I value my soul, Jace said. And I think you need someone who can tell you no sometimes. A part of you can't do that. He took her hand again. Let's survive this first. Let's stop the swarm. Then we can talk about forever. Lithria took a deep breath. She straightened her spine, the queen reassembling herself from the shattered pieces. You are stubborn, scavenger, she said, a faint smile returning. Very well. The war swarm. She turned back to the archive door. The activation key is not here. The file indicates it is kept in the central vault, the reliquary of the Ascendant. The big tower in the middle of the city? Jace asked. The one with all the guns? That is the one, she said. Then let's go steal a doomsday device, Jace said. The central vault was less a bank and more a fortress. It was a black needle piercing the heart of the capital, protected by hard light barriers and a battalion of elite guards. They did not go through the front door. They went through the sewers. It smells less like holiness down here, Jace muttered, wading through knee-deep sludge. Lithria did not complain. She was focused. Her nanites were acting as a jammer, blinding the sensors in the immediate vicinity. They reached the service elevator shaft. Jace hacked the panel, bypassing the alarm. "We have 5 minutes before the rotation changes," he said. They ascended rapidly. The doors opened onto the vault level. The hallway was lined with lasers. Jace threw a handful of dust into the air. The beams sizzled. "Wall-to-wall coverage," he said. "Impossible to crawl through." "Not for me," Lithria said. She dissolved. It was terrifying to watch. Her body lost cohesion, breaking apart into a swarm of silver mist, billions of nanites moving in unison. The mist flowed through the laser grid, reforming on the other side. She pressed the disable switch on the other side. "Show off," Jace muttered, stepping through the deactivated grid. They reached the inner sanctum. In the center of the room, floating in a magnetic field, was the key. It looked like a jagged piece of black glass, pulsing with red light. "That is it," Lithria said. "The control node." Jace approached it. He pulled a containment unit from his belt. "This is going to trigger a silent alarm," he said. "As soon as the weight changes, do it," Lithria said. "We will be gone before they arrive." Jace reached out. He grabbed the key. The room flashed red. "Run!" Jace yelled. They sprinted back to the elevator. Jace jammed the key into the containment unit, shielding its signal. But as they ran, Jace felt a sharp sting in his neck. He slapped a hand to his skin. He pulled it away. There was no insect, just a tiny, red welt. "What is it?" Lithria asked, seeing him stumble. "Nothing," Jace lied, breath coming short. "Just a cramp." They made it to the roof. Their extraction plan, a stolen air car Jace had parked on the landing pad, was waiting. "We did it," Jace laughed, the adrenaline making him giddy. "We actually did it." They ran toward the car, then the spotlights hit them. Blinding white light flooded the rooftop. 4 gunships rose from the gloom, surrounding them. Jace froze. A figure stepped out of the shadows near the air car. He was an older man, wearing the white and gold armor of a high commander. He had a scarred face and eyes that looked like flint. Jace stopped. His heart hammered against his ribs. "Colonel Thorne," he whispered. "Hello." "Jace," the colonel said. His voice was calm, fatherly. "You are looking well. A little pale, perhaps." Jace said. "You sent me the message. You recommended me for the dig." Thorne nodded. "I did. I knew you were the only one foolish enough to actually open the box." "Why?" Jace shouted. "Because we needed the queen," Thorne said, gesturing to Lithria. "And we needed a trigger. You were perfect. Jace, no family, no connections, emotionally malleable. I knew you wouldn't just kill her. I knew you would try to save her." He smiled. "And by saving her, you damned us all." Jace felt the sting on his neck burn. "You tagged me," he realized, "in the vault. A tracking nanite." "Of course," Thorne said. "We have been watching you since you landed. We let you get the key. It saves us the trouble of unhooking it from the grid." He raised his hand. "Take them." Lithria roared. She lunged forward, her hands glowing with nanite fire. But the gunships fired, not lasers, but sonic cannons. A wave of concussive sound hit the roof. Lithria screamed, clutching her head. The harmonics shattered her concentration, her nanites destabilized. She fell to her knees, the silver mist bleeding off her skin. "Lithria!" Jace tried to run to her. Two soldiers tackled him. They slammed his face into the pavement. He watched helplessly as they surrounded the queen. They fired a net of energy beams. It wrapped around her, forming a new cruciform harness of hard light. It pinned her arms, her wings, her power. She looked at Jace. Her eyes were wide with panic. Thorn walked over to Jace. He crouched down. "Do not worry, Jace," he whispered. "You still have a part to play. We need her blood to run the engine, but we need your blood to start the ignition." He stood up. "Bring the heretic and her pet. The ceremony begins in 1 hour." A soldier struck Jace in the back of the head with a rifle butt. The world went black. The light was not the blue-black dimness of the ice moon, nor the soft starlight of the living ship. It was a blinding, clinical white, searing through Jace's eyelids before he even opened them. He gasped, his chest heaving against a restraint that felt like a band of iron. Jace opened his eyes. He was in a cathedral, but one made of glass, gold, and hard light energy fields. It was a colossal chamber located at the very apex of the spire of the Ascendant, looking down upon the entire capital city. Through the transparent floor, he could see the golden rings of the megastructures orbiting the planet, millions of lights burning in the night. But his attention was drawn upward, suspended in the center of the room, held aloft by a lattice of humming energy beams, was Lithria. It was a perverse mirror of the moment he had found her. She was crucified again, but this time there were no rusty spears or ancient cables. She was locked in a web of pure white light. Her arms were spread wide, her ankles bound together, and a thick beam of energy was drilled directly into her chest, right where the star metal spear had been. She was awake. Her head was thrown back, her mouth open in a silent cry of agony. The nanites in her blood were glowing so brightly that her veins looked like rivers of violet fire beneath her pale skin. "Lithria!" Jace shouted. His voice was a croak. He struggled, testing his bonds. He was strapped to a vertical frame made of gold-plated steel, positioned directly facing her. Cables ran from his wrists and neck, feeding into the same central console that controlled her prison. "Do not struggle." "Jace," a familiar voice said, "you will only bruise yourself, and we need your blood pressure stable." Jace stopped. He looked to the base of the platform. Colonel Thorne stood there, hands clasped behind his back. Beside him stood a man in flowing robes of white silk, wearing a tall, intricate mitre of gold, the high prelate of the Holy Council. "You," Jace spat, "you set this whole thing up." Thorne smiled, a thin, humorless expression. "I told you, Jace, you were the key. We needed the queen, but we needed her awake, and we needed her motivated." The high prelate stepped forward. He was an older man with skin like parchment and eyes that looked like dead coals. He looked up at Lithria with a mixture of disgust and hunger. "She is magnificent in a heretical sort of way," the prelate noted. "The energy output is already exceeding our simulations. The war swarm is waking up." Lithria's eyes snapped down to them. They were fully black, the irises burning with terrifying intensity. "You will burn," she rasped. Her voice was distorted, amplified by the room's acoustics. "I will burn this city to ash." "Exactly," the prelate said, spreading his hands. "That is exactly what we need you to want." He turned to Jace, walking slowly toward him. "You see, boy, the galaxy has become complacent. Peace is bad for business. It is bad for faith. People stop praying when they are not afraid. They stop paying their tithes. They start asking questions about why we need emergency powers when there is no emergency. So you invent one," Jace said, the realization settling in his stomach like lead. "We do not invent," Thorne corrected. "We excavate." The prelate gestured to the massive holographic map hovering above the console. It showed the galaxy, with thousands of red dots lighting up in the fringe sectors. The war swarm, the prelate explained. A dormant fleet of nanite drones, hidden in dark space for a millennium. We found the protocols in the archives, but we could not activate them. The system is biometrically locked to her specific genetic code. And my blood, Jace realized. You stole the key, but you need an igniter. Thorn nodded. You carry her sanguine code, Jace, but you are human. Your biology acts as a bridge. We feed the command sequence through you, into her, and she broadcasts it to the fleet. And then, Jace asked. And then we target the outer rim, the prelate said indifferently. We trigger a controlled outbreak. A few dozen worlds will be consumed. Tragic, of course. We will broadcast the footage of the Queen's rage. We will show the galaxy the monster they have feared for 1,000 years. And then the Council swoops in to save the day, Jace finished. You kill the monster you created, and everyone thanks you for the chains you put on them. Panic is a ladder, the prelate said smoothly. Give them a monster, and they will beg for our chains. They will demand we build higher walls and bigger fleets. They will execute their own neighbors if we tell them they might be infected. It secures our rule for another 1,000 years. He turned back to the console. Begin the sequence. Thorn typed a command. The room hummed. The sound went from a low vibration to a high-pitched whine that drilled into Jace's teeth. The energy beam hitting Lithria's chest turned from white to angry red. She screamed. It was not a scream of fear. It was a scream of pure, concentrated fury. Jace felt it. The bond between them slammed open. He was not just watching her pain, he was living it. He felt the fire in her veins. He felt the invasion of the machine mind, the Council's computers forcing their way into her neural cortex, trying to override her will. But worse than the pain was the memory. Jace saw what she saw. He saw the betrayal 1,000 years ago. He saw the faces of the men who had smiled at her, shaken her hand, and then nailed her to the engine. He felt the crushing weight of a millennium of darkness, fully conscious, unable to move, listening to the universe forget her name. The rage was a physical thing. It was a black tide rising in her soul, drowning out the reason, drowning out the mercy. Let it burn, a voice in her mind whispered. It was her voice, but twisted. Let them all burn. They are vermin. They are liars. Show them the monster. Be the monster. Above them. The war swarm lattice flared. The red dots on the map began to blink. Activation initiated. The automated voice of the tower announced, broadcast signal building, target designation, Sector 7. Jace felt a surge of electricity hit his own body. His back arched against the frame. The cables in his neck grew hot. They were siphoning the nanites from his blood, using him as the catalyst to break her mental shields. Lithria! Jace shouted, gritting his teeth against the agony. Don't do it! Don't let them in! She looked at him. Her face was contorted, her fangs fully extended, saliva dripping from her chin. She looked barely humanoid. They hurt us, Jace, she hissed. Her voice was in his head, clearer than the room around them. They hurt us. I want them to die. I know, Jace screamed back, physically and mentally. I know, but not like this, not for them. The prelate laughed. Look at her. The devourer wakes. Record this. Broadcast it to every screen in the capital. Cameras' drones buzzed around Lithria, capturing every moment of her transformation into the beast. The pain in Jace's body spiked. He felt his heart stutter. The machine was drawing too much power, and he was going to die. He was going to burn out like a cheap fuse. Jace closed his eyes. He stopped fighting the restraints. He stopped fighting the pain. Instead, he pushed. He pushed his mind down the bond. He followed the trail of fire and blood that connected him to her. He dove into the psychic storm that was raging inside the queen. The world around him vanished. The white room, the prelate, the pain. It all dissolved into gray mist. He was standing in a void, a dark, swirling expanse of stars and nanite clouds. In the center of the storm stood Lithria. She was not bound here. She was huge, a titan of shadow and starlight, towering over him. She was armored in obsidian, holding a sword made of bleeding light. Her eyes were twin black holes. "Go away," her voice boomed, shaking the foundations of his mind. "I am becoming." Jace walked toward her. He looked small, insignificant against her power, but he did not stop. "You are not becoming Lithria," he said. His voice was quiet, but in this place, it carried the weight of absolute truth. "You are just remembering how to be afraid." "I am not afraid," the Titan roared. "I am wrath." "You are terrified," Jace said. "You are scared that they were right. You are scared that you really are the monster." He stepped into the shadow of her giant form. The Titan raised the sword. "I will end them." Jace reached out his hand. "Then end me," he said, "because I am right here, and I am not leaving." The Titan froze. The giant, black eyes looked down at the small human man standing in the void. Jace looked up. "I saw the tapes. Lithria. I saw the trial. I saw a woman who stood in front of a room full of tyrants and demanded justice for the weak. I saw a queen who offered her own blood to heal the sick." The giant form flickered. The edges of the obsidian armor began to dissolve into smoke. "They took that from me," the voice whispered, shrinking now. "They tried." Jace said, "They painted over it, but they couldn't take it, because you are still her." He walked closer. The giant form collapsed, swirling down until she was human-sized again. She stood before him, wearing the tattered dress from the ice moon, shivering, her arms wrapped around herself. She was crying. "They made me hate. Jace," she sobbed. "There is so much hate." Jace stepped forward and took her face in his hands. He brushed his thumbs over her cheeks, wiping away the phantom tears. "I know," he said. "I have got enough hate for both of us. I hate them for what they did to you. I hate them for my sister. I hate them for every lie they ever told." He leaned his forehead against hers. "But I do not love the hate," he whispered. "And I do not love the monster." Lithria froze. Her breath hitched. "What?" she breathed. "I love you," Jace said. The words hung in the silence of the void, brighter than any star. "I love the woman who saved a frozen scavenger even though she was starving. I love the woman who dances the waltz and doesn't know what a sandwich is. I love the queen who wanted to build a garden, not a graveyard." Lithria looked at him. The violet fire in her eyes softened, turning into a deep, luminous indigo. "Jace," she whispered, "you are going to die. Your heart, I can feel it stopping." "Then let's make it count," Jace said. He kissed her. It was not a physical kiss. It was a collision of souls. It was two minds melding into one perfect circuit. In that moment, the barriers vanished. He felt her power, vast, ancient, terrifying, rush into him. She felt his stubbornness, his chaotic human hope, his absolute refusal to break. Desire and devotion twisted together into a single strand of DNA. It was an impossible intimacy, a closeness that no two beings were ever meant to share. It was terrifying. It was perfect. They were not prisoner and battery. They were pilot and ship. They were king and queen. "Take it," Jace whispered in her mind. "Take it all." Lithria gasped against his lips in the void. "Together," she answered. In the physical world, Lithria's eyes snapped open. The blackness vanished, replaced by a clear, blinding white light. The scream of rage cut off instantly. The high prelate frowned, stepping closer to the glass shield. What is happening? Why did the signal stop? Thorn looked at his data pad. The readings were spiking off the chart. She is re-indexing, Thorn stammered. The command syntax. It is changing. Lithria looked at the prelate. She did not smile. She did not snarl. She looked at him with the cold, absolute judgment of a god. You wanted a broadcast, she said. Her voice was no longer distorted. It was clear. It was amplified by the war swarm lattice, resonating in every speaker, every comlink, every audio implant on the planet. Let us give them a broadcast. She squeezed her hands into fists. Jace, staring at her from his own cross, grinned through the blood running down his chin. Light them up, Your Majesty. Lithria pulled. She did not pull against the chains. She pulled on the network. The war swarm fleet, dormant in the deep dark, received a new command. Target designation, update, priority, alpha, target, weapons, target, control nodes, target, the lie. Above the capital, the sky tore open. Thousands of slipspace ruptures appeared. The war swarm arrived, but they were not the devouring cloud the prelate had promised. They were precision instruments. Clouds of silver nanites descended on the orbital cathedrals. They did not touch the civilians. They swarmed over the weapon emplacements, the missile batteries, the shield generators. Metal dissolved into dust. Gun barrels turned to sand. The golden chains holding the megastructures melted away. The prelate screamed, "Stop it! Kill her! Override the code! We cannot!" Thorn yelled, throwing his data pad as it sparked and died. She has locked us out. The encryption. It is bio-coded to both of them. And then came the truth. The nanites flooded the city's holographic projectors. The image of the demon Lithria vanished. In its place, the unedited footage of the trial appeared. On every screen, on every building, in the sky itself, the galaxy saw the truth. They saw the prelate's predecessors signing the order. They heard the words, "Fabrication of narrative required." They saw the young queen pleading for peace, and they saw her crucifixion. The silence that fell over the capital was heavier than thunder. In the tower chamber, the feedback loop was becoming critical. The machine, denied its intended release, was overloading. Jace convulsed. The power surging through his body was too much. His human nerves were frying. He felt his heart seizing, a stuttering drumbeat that was failing to keep time. "Jace!" Lithria screamed. She felt his life force flickering out. She looked at the energy beams holding her. She looked at the prelate and Thorn, who were cowering by the door, trying to pry it open. She made a choice. She roared, and her body shifted. The armor grew, sharp and jagged. The horns erupted from her brow, and she embraced the monster form, not to destroy, but to break. She tore her right arm free from the energy beam. The feedback burned her flesh to the bone, but the nanites knit it back together in seconds. She tore her left arm free, though she dropped to the floor, the impact cracking the glass. She lunged at Jace's frame, and he was limp, his head hanging, blood dripping from his nose and ears. "Jace!" She sobbed, ripping the cables from his neck. He fell into her arms. He was cold, colder than he had been on the ice moon. "Too much," he whispered, his eyes unfocused. "Too much power." For a human, the room was shaking. The central console was spitting arcs of lightning. The overload was building to a detonation. Lithria looked at the energy swirling in his veins. The toxic buildup of nanite feedback was killing him. She did not hesitate. She placed her hands on his chest. "Give it to me," she commanded. She reversed the flow, instead of feeding on him. She siphoned the poison out. She drew the lethal electrical charge, the corrupted data, the burning heat of the overload into her own body. It hit her like a physical blow. She arched her back, screaming as her own cells began to rupture. Lithria. Stop. Jace gasped, trying to push her away. You will. Burn out. I am not fragile. She gritted out, her skin turning gray, then black, cracks of light appearing on her face. She pulled the last of the poison from him. Jace took a sudden, deep breath, his heart restarting with a strong, steady rhythm. Lithria staggered back. She was glowing with unstable energy. She looked like a star about to go supernova. She turned to the console. She turned to the prelate. The prelate turned, his face a mask of terror. You cannot kill me. I am the voice of the light. Lithria looked at him. She looked tired. There is no light here, she said. She raised her hands. She released the energy. It was not an explosion of fire. It was a wave of pure disruption. The blast wave hit the console. It vaporized the control interface. It traveled down the spire, blowing out every circuit, every server, every lock in the Holy Council's network. The lights in the tower died. The energy fields vanished. The gravity stabilizers failed. The spire groaned, tipping slightly. The prelate fell to his knees as his staff, a piece of high-tech theater, powered down and went dark. The door to the chamber burst open. The prelate's own royal guard stood there, but their weapons were not pointed at the queen. They were pointed at the prelate. We saw, the captain of the guard said, his voice shaking. We saw the footage. The prelate scrambled backward. It is a trick, a demon trick. No, the captain said, stepping into the room. It was the truth. He looked at Lithria. She was slumped against the shattered remains of the central frame, smoke rising from her armor. Jace was crawling toward her. The captain lowered his weapon. He knelt. Lithria coughed, silver blood spattering the floor. She looked at Jace as he reached her. Did we win? She whispered. Jace pulled her into his lap. He brushed the hair from her face. She was healing, slowly. The cracks in her skin were closing. Yeah, Jace choked out, tears cutting tracks through the grime on his face. We won. You broke the machine. Lithria closed her eyes, leaning into his warmth. I did not break it, she murmured. We did. Jace looked up. The walls of the tower were transparent. Outside, the lights of the city were coming back on, sector by sector. But the holograms were gone. The golden chains were gone. Smoke rose from the council headquarters below, where the people were storming the gates. It wasn't a massacre, it was a revolution. Jace looked down at the woman in his arms, the queen who had refused to be a monster. He kissed her forehead. Rest now, your majesty, he whispered. The shift is over. The dust over Horus Primus had not settled. Not really. It hung in the upper atmosphere, turning the sunsets a violent, bruised purple. It was the dust of golden cathedrals that had been turned to sand, the particulate remains of a lie that had lasted 1,000 years. Jace leaned against the balcony of what had once been the High Prelate's private sanctum. He wore a jacket that was cleaner than his old salvage gear, but still had the comfortable, worn-in look of someone who refused to wear stiff formal wear. He held a glass of synthetic wine, watching the reconstruction crews below. They were not rebuilding the spires. They were taking them apart. It is strange, isn't it? Lithria's voice came from behind him. To see a world undressing. Jace turned. She was standing in the archway, backlit by the glow of the command console inside. She wore no armor today. She was dressed in simple robes of charcoal and silver, the colors of smoke and starlight. Her skin had regained its luminous moonlight pallor, the gray sickness of the disguise long gone. It is better than the hologram, Jace said, gesturing with his glass. At least the scaffolding is honest. Lithria stepped out onto the balcony. She looked down at the city, her expression unreadable. They want me to rule it, she said softly. Jace paused. He knew this was coming. The Provisional Council, a ragtag group of terrified, low-ranking bishops, rebel leaders, and one very confused union rep from the Sanitation Guild, had been begging for an audience all week. And, Jace asked, they offered me the title of Empress Protector, she said. They want to put the golden chains back up, just with my face on the currency instead of the prelates. They are terrified of freedom. Jace, they want a mother who will tell them what to do and who to kill. She gripped the railing, her knuckles white. I could do it. I could impose order by sunset. I could fix the food shortages and the power grid with a single command to the swarm. But, Jace prompted. But I would be building the cage that holds me, she said. If I take the throne, I validate the system that crucified me. I become the monster who won, rather than the woman who broke the machine. She turned to him, her violet eyes fierce. I refused. Jace let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He walked over and stood next to her, bumping his shoulder against hers. Good, he said. I really didn't want to have to learn court etiquette. I still don't know which fork is the salad fork. Lithria smiled, a small, genuine thing that reached her eyes. I told them that a queen sits on a throne, she said, but a leader walks among the people. I told them I would not be their empress. I would be a witness and a mediator. A witness, Jace repeated. I like that. It sounds less likely to get us assassinated. Do not be so sure, Lithria said dryly. The truth is often more offensive than tyranny. The weeks that followed were a blur of jump gates and diplomatic shuttles. They did not stay in the capital. They boarded the Night Singer, which Lithria had stripped of its heavy weapon batteries, turning the internal bays into cargo holds for medical supplies and terraforming equipment. They traveled to the fringe worlds first, the places that had been bled dry to feed the core. On a dusty mining colony in the Sector 7 rim, Jace watched Lithria stand before a crowd of 300 hardened miners. They held improvised weapons, looking at her with a mixture of awe and terrified superstition. She did not stand on a podium. She walked into the middle of the crowd. The council told you I was a devourer, she said, her voice projecting without a microphone, resonating in the chest of every person there. They told you I took blood to steal your life. She rolled up her sleeve, exposing the pale, scarred skin of her arm. Blood is life, she said. That is true. But power taken is theft. Power given is a gift. I do not want your worship. I want your consent. She explained the old ways of the Sanguinari Dominion, the blood pacts that healed diseases, the exchange of vitality for technology. She spoke not as a god, but as a negotiator. Monsters are stories told by the powerful to keep you afraid of the dark, she told them. But the dark is just the place where you cannot see. If you light a candle, the monster becomes just a neighbor. Jace watched from the ramp of the ship, his arms crossed. He saw the tension leave the miner's shoulders. He saw a mother step forward, holding a child with a wasting sickness, and ask Lithria if the old medicines were real. He saw Lithria kneel in the dirt, regardless of her silk robes, and touch the child's forehead with a gentleness that made his chest ache. She is good at this, Jace thought. She was never meant to be a statue. She was meant to be this. Later that night, aboard the ship, the atmosphere was quiet. The Night Singer hummed with a contented vibration, orbiting the red planet below. Jace sat in the mess hall, reading a data pad, Lithria walked in, looking exhausted but satisfied. She sat down across from him, stealing the piece of synthetic toast from his plate. "Hey," Jace protested weakly. "That was my midnight snack." "Taxation," she murmured, taking a bite. "The price of living with royalty." "You are a tyrant," Jace deadpanned. "I am going to report you to the Provisional Council." Lithria laughed softly. She leaned across the table, resting her chin on her hand. She watched him. "Your ears turn red when I look at you like this," she noted. Jace blinked, instinctively touching his ear. "They do not." "They do," she insisted, her eyes dancing, and it is a physiological response on capillary dilation caused by, what is it, anxiety or attraction? Jace felt the heat rising in his neck. "Both. Probably. You are unnerving." "Lithria." "You stare." "I am memorizing," she said, her voice dropping to a lower, more serious register. Jace put the datapad down. He looked at her. The playfulness had vanished, replaced by a melancholy that had been growing between them for days. "Memorizing what?" he asked. "You," she said. She reached out and traced the line of his jaw with a cool fingertip. "You have a new gray hair here," she whispered, "and the lines around your eyes, they are deeper than they were on the ice moon." "Stress will do that," Jace said, trying to keep his voice light. "Saving the galaxy is hard work. It is time." "Jace," she said, "it is time." Jace swallowed. He knew what she meant. They had avoided the conversation during the chaos of the revolution and during the busy weeks of the tour, but the reality was sitting between them like a loaded gun. He was human. He was 29 years old. He would live, maybe, another 50 or 60 years. She was an ascendant. She was biologically immortal. She had already lived a millennium, and she would live 10 more. "I am dying," Jace said bluntly. "Just very slowly. That is what being human is." "I cannot watch it," Lithria said. Her hand trembled against his face. "I cannot watch you wither. Jace, I cannot be the anchor that outlasts the ship. If I lose you..." She pulled her hand back, clenching it into a fist. "I survived the crucifixion because I was angry," she whispered. "I do not think I could survive your death. I would not want to." Jace reached out and took her fist, gently prying her fingers open. "So what is the alternative?" he asked. "You turn me? I become a vampire? We drink blood cocktails on the veranda for the next eon?" She looked at their joined hands. "Not a vampire," she said. "That process, it destroys the original soul. It replaces the human with the hunger. I would never do that to you." "Then what?" "A bond," she said. "A deep bond." She looked up at him, her eyes pleading. "I can rewrite your biology. Jace, not completely. I can infuse your cells with a stabilized strain of the Sanguine code. It would not make you immortal, not truly, but it would halt your aging. It would link your life force to mine. As long as I live, you would not fade. You would share my senses, my strength." She paused. "And I would share your fragility. If you were hurt, I would bleed. If I were drained, you would faint. We would be synchronized." Jace sat back. He looked at the viewport, at the stars streaking by. He thought about his sister, Ilara. She was gone. He thought about his old life, the debts, the cold, the emptiness. Then he looked at Lithria. He looked at the woman who had ripped the universe apart to save him. "If I do this," Jace asked quietly, "will I still be me?" Lithria hesitated. "You will be you," she said, "but you will be more. The bond is intimate." Jace, there are no secrets in the Sanguine Code. I would hear your thoughts before you spoke them. You would feel my emotions as your own. The boundary between Jace and Lythria would blur. She looked down. It scares me, she admitted. To be that exposed, to let someone else inside the fortress. Jace looked at her. He saw the fear in her eyes, the fear of the powerful creature terrified of being vulnerable. He realized that for her, this wasn't about granting him power. It was about giving him the power to hurt her. It was the ultimate surrender of control. He stood up. He walked around the table and stood before her. "Stand up," he said softly. Lythria stood. She was taller than him, but she seemed to shrink, waiting for his answer. "I do not want to be your pet," Jace said, "and I do not want to be your subject." "I know," she whispered. "But," Jace continued, taking her hands, "I do not want to walk behind you, and I definitely do not want to leave you alone in this big, stupid galaxy." He squeezed her hands. "I want to walk beside you, Lythria. If this bond means we are partners, if it means I carry your weight and you carry mine, then yes." Lythria let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "You are brave, scavenger," she said, "or very foolish, a little of both." Jace smiled. "Now, how do we do this? Do I need to sign a form?" "No," she said. The humor faded, replaced by a sacred, heavy silence. "Sit with me." They sat on the floor of the mess hall, facing each other, cross-legged. The ship hummed around them, a cathedral of metal and light. Lythria reached out and placed her hands on his shoulders. Her grip was firm, grounding. "Close your eyes," she commanded, "and do not pull away, no matter what you feel. Do not pull away." Jace closed his eyes. He felt her breath on his face. He smelled the scent of ozone and ancient dust. He felt her lips brush the skin of his neck, right over the carotid artery. His heart hammered against his ribs. Every instinct in his lizard brain screamed predator. Every instinct screamed run, but he forced his hands to move up, to grip her arms. He pulled her closer. "I am here," he whispered. She bit him. It was not a nip. It was a piercing, definitive puncture. Jace gasped, his back arching. But there was no pain. Instead, there was light. It started at his neck and exploded outward like a star going supernova in his veins. It was heat. It was golden, liquid fire pouring into his bloodstream. He felt the floor drop away. He was falling, tumbling through a void of violet nebulae. But he was not falling alone. He felt her. He felt the texture of her mind, vast, crystalline, ancient. He felt the weight of 1,000 years of silence. He felt the sharp, jagged edges of her trauma and the soft, hidden valleys of her hope. He felt her love for him. It was massive. It was terrifying. It was a tidal wave that threatened to drown him. "I have you," her voice echoed in his mind. "I have you." "I am here," he thought back, projecting his own clumsy human love against the tide. "I am not letting go." The sensation shifted. The heat settled into his bones. He felt his senses expanding. He could hear the hum of the ship's engine as a musical note. He could hear the heartbeat of the sleeping crew in the lower decks. He could see the ultraviolet spectrum of the starlight through his closed eyelids. He felt his own body knitting together, the old scars fading, the ache in his joints vanishing. He felt strong. Slowly, the intensity faded, leaving a hum of warm, constant connection in the back of his mind. Jace opened his eyes. The room looked different. The colors were sharper, more vibrant. The air shimmered with dust motes that looked like diamonds. Lythria was watching him. Her mouth was stained with a single drop of his blood. Her eyes were wide, luminous, and filled with a profound relief. "Jace?" she whispered. Jace took a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. He reached up and touched the spot on his neck. The wound was already gone, leaving only a faint silver scar in the shape of a starburst. "I am here," he said. His voice sounded deeper, more resonant. He looked at his hands. They looked the same, but he could feel the energy humming under the skin. He looked at her. He didn't just see her face. He felt her anxiety fluttering like a bird in his chest. "You are worried I regret it," he said. She nodded, looking down. "It is a lot." Jace laughed. He reached out and pulled her into a hug, burying his face in her hair. "It is perfect," he said. "I feel awake. For the first time in my life, I feel fully awake." Lithria collapsed against him, her strength finally giving way. She held him as if he were the only solid thing in the universe. "We are one," she murmured into his shoulder. "No more silence. No more silence." Jace agreed. "Just us." 3 months later, the grand summit on the neutral world of Othris was a boring affair. It was a gathering of 36 planetary governors, all arguing over trade tariffs and border disputes. Jace stood behind Lithria's chair. He wore a new uniform, black and silver, cut to allow for movement, with the insignia of the Night Singer on the shoulder. He stood perfectly still, his hands clasped behind his back. To the casual observer, he was just a bodyguard. To Lithria, he was a constant, warm presence in her mind, a second set of eyes watching the room. The guy in the green sash is lying. Jace's thought projected clearly into her head. His heart rate spiked when he mentioned the grain quota. "I know," Lithria thought back, her face impassive. "He is skimming off the top. I will address it." At the far end of the table, a pompous ex-council noble named Lord Vane was speaking. He was red-faced and blustering, banging his fist on the table. "This is preposterous," Vane shouted. "Why should we listen to a woman who is technically a biological weapon? The council may have fallen, but the laws of nature remain. Predators do not negotiate with prey." He pointed a shaking finger at Lithria. "You are a monster, madam, and I will not be dictated to by a creature that should be in a zoo." The room went silent. Jace did not move. He did not reach for his weapon. He simply looked at Lord Vane, and for a fraction of a second, he let the mask slip. He smiled. It was not a human smile. His lips pulled back too far. His canines, now slightly elongated and razor-sharp, glinted in the harsh light. His eyes flashed with a violet, predatory luminescence. He let out a low, sub-harmonic growl, a sound that vibrated in the water glasses on the table. Lord Vane turned pale. He stammered, clutched his chest, and sat down abruptly, looking like he might faint. Under the table, Lithria kicked Jace's shin. "Behave," she projected. Though Jace could feel the ripple of amusement in her mind, Jace composed his face instantly, returning to the stoic bodyguard persona. Lithria cleared her throat. "Lord Vane," she said, her voice cool and polite. "As my associate was seemingly about to point out, we are not here to discuss biology. We are here to discuss the future. Now, about those grain quotas." Later, in the corridor, they walked side by side toward the hangar bay. "You were showing off," Lithria teased, nudging his arm. "He deserved it," Jace muttered. "Did you hear him? Creature in a zoo. I should have bitten him. Just a little." "Consort, you are drooling," she whispered, leaning close to his ear. Jace rolled his eyes. "I was not. I was asserting dominance. It is a very complex diplomatic maneuver. You freed the crucified alien vampire queen after 1,000 years. Lithria laughed, the sound echoing in the empty hall. And now she has to embarrass you in public to keep you from causing an incident. Hey, Jace grinned, taking her hand. Someone has to be the scary one. You are too busy being a saint these days. Lithria squeezed his hand. Her smile softened. I am no saint, Jace. I am just trying. And you are doing great, Jace said softly. The war swarm had changed. The nanites still permeated the galaxy, but they were no longer a dormant plague. They had become a network. Lithria had reprogrammed the entire fleet to act as a global defense grid. If a warlord tried to arm a nuclear warhead, the swarm dismantled the detonator. If a fleet tried to bombard a civilian city, their targeting computers turned to glass. It was an enforced peace, fragile and controversial, but it held. The galaxy was learning to talk instead of shoot, mostly because shooting no longer worked. Lithria and Jace stood on the bridge of the Night Singer. The star map showed a galaxy that was slowly turning from red to blue. Where to next? Jace asked. Lithria looked at the map. There are rumors of a blood cult rising in the Outer Rim, worshipping the old council myths. We should go there, dismantle the lies before they take root. Jace nodded. A never-ending job. It is a life, Lithria said. She turned to him. One day, she said, her voice quiet, even with the bond, the entropy will win. You will choose to rest, and I will remain. Jace looked at her. He felt the sadness in her, deep and old, but he also felt the acceptance. That day is a long way off. Lithria, he said. But it will come, she insisted. And when it does, Jace said, stepping closer, you will not be alone. You will carry me with you, in the blood, in the memory. I am part of the code now. He touched her forehead with his. But for now, we have work to do, and I have a date with a very dangerous woman. Lithria smiled. System, she commanded. Set course for the coordinates I locked in. Not the Outer Rim, Jace asked. A detour, she said. The ice moon was quiet. The research station was gone, buried under drifts of blue snow. The obsidian spires of the cathedral had collapsed, leaving only jagged ruins jutting from the ice. The Night Singer touched down silently on the glacier. Jace and Lithria walked out onto the ice. The cold was absolute. The wind howled, carrying needles of frost, but they did not feel it. The internal heat of their bond kept them warm, a furnace burning against the entropy of the universe. They walked to the edge of the great abyss, the place where the cruciform engine had once hung. The pit was filled with snow now. It looks smaller, Jace said, his breath misting in the air. It always does, Lithria said, when you are no longer afraid of it. She stood looking out at the desolation. This was the place where her life had ended, and where it had begun again. Thank you, she whispered. Jace looked at her. For what? For stopping. She said, for looking at the monster and seeing the person, for pulling the spear. Jace wrapped his arm around her waist. He pulled her close, wrapping his heavy, warm cloak around both of them. For the record, he said, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. I am never freeing anyone nailed to a space cross again. Freezing instantly as hell on the joints, even with the upgrade, Lithria laughed. It was a bright, clear sound that cut through the howling wind. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Next time, she murmured, pressing closer to his warmth. We thaw together. They stood there for a long time, watching the starlight glitter on the ice. They were two anomalies in the dark, a queen who refused a crown, and a scavenger who became a king. Above them, the clouds parted. The galaxy spun on, messy and broken and beautiful. Let's go, Jace said, turning them back toward the ship. I think I left the stove on. Lithria smiled, and together, they walked away from the grave and into the life they had chosen.